Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of CPPR Dialogue on Underwater Domain Awareness in the Coastal India, Strengthening Security, Sustainability, and Strategic Collaboration. I'm Alina Tisavu, Research Associate in the International Relations Vertical of CPPR, and the moderator for today's webinar. This webinar is the fourth one in our webinar series as part of a research project titled Indian Coastal Think Tank Network, supported by the Asia Foundation, New Delhi. The Indian Coastal Think Tank Network, or ICTN as they call it, aims to create a network of coastal think tanks focused on policy-driven analysis of issues in India's coastal region from local, regional, and national perspectives. We have 9 different experts joining us on this network from different think tanks and institutions across coastal states in India, focusing on the following themes: climate change and gender, coastal security, blue economy, fisheries, coastal ecology, tourism, underwater domain awareness, ports and shipping, disaster management, and coastal energy. For today's webinar, our thematic area for discussion is underwater domain awareness, a key idea that is crucial for security of India's waters. The maritime domain is a vital frontier for economic prosperity, environmental sustainability, and national security. With India's vast coastline and increasing maritime activities, the concept of underwater domain awareness has become a crucial pillar for ensuring the sustainable and secure use of oceanic resources. This webinar will explore the multifaceted role of UDA in coastal areas, addressing coastal security challenges and emerging maritime threats, the impact of technological advancements, and India's strategic initiatives in this domain. Additionally, the discussion will highlight the role of local governments and coastal communities in strengthening the UDA framework and emphasize the importance of international cooperation, global partnerships, and fostering a collective approach to maritime governance. By integrating technology, policy, and collaboration, UDA can be resilient and future-ready maritime ecosystem. Before we get into the conversation, I would like to introduce you to our esteemed panelists for the day. Vice Admiral MP Muralidharan. Vice Admiral MP Muralidharan returned as a DG of the Indian Coast Guard in 2013. In a career of close to 4 decades in the Indian Navy, he has held several key operational and staff appointments, including command of 3 warships in Maharashtra and Gujarat naval area. He was also the commandant of the Indian Naval Academy and chief personnel of the Navy. Post-retirement, he became a member of the Armed Forces Tribunal, an appointment equivalent to the High Court judge. He is a regular writer and speaker on strategic and maritime affairs. Vice Admiral Muralidharan was awarded the Adivishishta Seva Medal twice by the President of India and is also a recipient of the Naval Sena Medal. He is presently a distinguished fellow in maritime defense studies at the Center for Public Policy Research. I welcome you to the webinar.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And to join in on the conversation, we have with us here today Dr. Commander Arnab Das. Dr. Arnab Das is a researcher, maritime strategist, and entrepreneur. He's a founder and director of Maritime Research Center under the Foundation for Underwater Domain Awareness, Pune. He is also working on a unique concept of underwater domain awareness as its main focus. He also runs a startup, MS Nirvani Technology Private Limited, which provides consultancies and services for high-end maritime security solutions and marine conservation support. He advises startups on underwater technology solutions and defense strategies. He has over 100 publications, a book, and 2 book chapters to his credit. He was invited to Tokyo University in 2014 as a visiting researcher to participate in the design and development of passive acoustic monitoring systems for freshwater dolphins. He was also at the Acoustic Research Laboratory of the Tropical Science Institute at the National University of Singapore in 2015 for a year. Post his retirement from the Navy to understand underwater technology and development from a global perspective. Welcome, Dr. Arnab Das.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I am hoping we'll have an engaging discussion ahead. And before we begin, I would like to remind our viewers that you can put your questions in the YouTube comment box, which we'll be taking up towards the end of the session. And now that we're beginning, I think it's quite important for us to understand the nuances and implications of underwater domain awareness in the coastal area. And in this regard, it's important to understand the concept of underwater domain awareness. So the first question would be in defining this concept, and also its very close connection to the concept of maritime domain awareness. This question is to Mr. MP Muralidharan.
Yeah, thank you, Alina. Let me first get to the basics. Now, what's happened is over the last 2, 3 decades, especially at the end of the Cold War, there are a lot of globalization of trade and development of the Asian economies have taken place in a big way. And with this, the concept of Indo-Pacific arose. It was said by the Japanese Prime Minister in Indian Parliament, but now the whole world accepts the Indo-Pacific concept and therefore highlighting the importance of maritime arena. Now, when you look at the maritime domain, it becomes very important that maritime security has a predominant role. And even the UN Security Council has maritime security one of the focus areas. Especially, they want to focus on legitimate use, safeguarding the legitimate use of the oceans in conforming with the international law or the 1982 UNCLOS, which are among the other global instruments. Now, towards the end of the last century, it became evident that we are facing less and less direct traditional naval confrontation on the high seas, which used to earlier see. The challenges are more into the littoral region, which brings it more into focus, what you talked of the coastal communities, etc. And the challenges also becoming non-conventional, which are also termed the low intensity maritime operations or LIMO. Now, many of you would have read through the papers, even off late, all this has been happening, which is maritime terrorism, piracy, drug and human trafficking, gun running, poaching, and something which affects the economy of nations very is actually the illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing. And what is more important is there is gathering of sensitive seismic and economic data, which is a major threat to the energy security, economy, and environment of the nation. Now, to achieve maritime security, it would be very obvious that the first step would be enhancing knowledge of awareness of the maritime domain. Now, maritime domain awareness, as we now call it, it's not, while it's a new term, nations across centuries have always been trying to know what is happening around their coast. But today, the International Maritime Organization has defined it as an effective understanding of anything associated with maritime domain that could impact security, safety, economy, or environment. In very simple term, it amounts to improving situational awareness to initiate speedy responses to any kind of scenario in the maritime domain. Like if you find something coming up, you got to send your maritime forces to prevent that threat from reaching a coastline. Now, you'll also agree that maritime domain awareness is something needed on a continuous basis to enable timely identification of threats and development and develop plans to overcome them both at strategic and operational levels. Now, this also applies to getting, if you see a storm developing, you need to warn the coastal community and the people around. All this today, it calls for monitoring the sea and coastal areas under the sea, in the air and space, through cyber and even cyber surveillance. Now, closer cooperation to enhance MDA would allow continuous surveillance and identification of hostile threats. Now, when we look at maritime domain awareness, the normal tendency is to visualize only the surface or air picture, because that is what we see. But underwater domain awareness, which we are discussing today, is something very, very important, which is actually focused on the underwater sector, and it's a very key element of MDA. From security perspective, UDA is vital to safeguard sea lanes of communication, passage along coastal waters, and to safeguard other maritime assets against underwater threat, be it from submarines, mines, divers, and underwater unmanned vehicles that are becoming more and more. So actually, it's not only a military or defense requirement, but also a very scientific one to monitor undersea geophysical activities, which can provide vital clues to detect natural disasters and gather data on living and non-living resources in the sea. Today, with the world looking at metals and minerals from the undersea, we are all used to getting oil from there, but metals and minerals become so. Therefore, once again, your underwater domain awareness becomes very important. And the total domain awareness with underwater or the entire maritime is not something that is easily achieved, as the seamless nature of maritime domain enables a steady flow of threats and challenges from one area to the other. You'll agree there are no walls across the oceans. So anywhere where the maritime frontiers reach, You can be neighbors, you may be thousands of miles apart. So, key ingredients are intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and it calls for combined effort of multiple agencies to monitor areas to correlate to develop tactical picture for very timely action. So, which means including patrolling by ships, aircraft, unmanned aerial vehicles, space-based surveillance, and underwater surveillance, especially at choke points or vital areas, very near well, channels are coming out. You can imagine if there is some underwater threat developing, it can block the entire channel. So anti-submarine and underwater unmanned vehicle operations would also call for seabed-based monitoring systems. Now, this is basically what it is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for highlighting the importance of underwater domain awareness within the framework of the maritime domain awareness. And now that we are familiar with the concept, it's important that we look at it from the coastal perspective. So the next question would be about the importance of UDA from the coastal angle. In that case, how important is a UDA framework for coastal security in terms of threat detection like smuggling, illegal trade, and piracy? And how does the UDA framework navigate these challenges? Question is to Dr. Arnab.
Thank you, Alina. Firstly, thank you for inviting me. And uh, Admiral Sir has very nicely given a broad canvas of what is MDA and what is UDA. I just want to add a couple of points before I come to the focus of the coastal waters. Uh, Broadly, the MDA term came by the International Maritime Organization. The Technical Committee of the International Maritime Organization is one which coined this term. And the definition, sir, has already discussed. But for the strategic community to get involved and the policymakers to get involved, it needed some trigger. So the 9/11 globally was a trigger which brought MDA to the focus. And in our part of the world, the 26/11 incident triggered maritime domain awareness being pushed in a very, very serious manner. So huge amount of resources were put into this, and reasonably lot of infrastructure was built around it. But the problem here is that because they were, as I call it, event-driven formulations, and it was a security episode that triggered this, it remained security-driven. And security establishments have a certain way of working in the sense that, they are worried about the data security because these are highly classified data, and sharing this can kind of cause issues for them. So it made it difficult for other stakeholders to participate. I mean, when I say other stakeholders, blue economy is one big area, sustainability and climate change is a big area, and most important is science and technology. Now, to differentiate the MDA and UDA, the UDA particularly, which is in some way one can say that it is the underwater component of MDA. But I somehow differ in this because what has happened is underwater domain requires very specialized acoustic technology because it is only the acoustics which can see below the water. So the larger MDA somehow missed the underwater part. The conventional MDA that we keep hearing and keep observing, it has somehow missed the underwater component. And that is a very big challenge. The second aspect is that, so the large capacity and capability building is required. Now, the second aspect, now coming, now I want to drift towards the coastal part of it. Now, the MDA discussions on high table remain on the high table, and the smaller countries, I mean, one is the smaller island developing nations or the developing world finds it very hard to participate because they don't have the kind of resources. And sometimes they also criticize that MDA has become a more a means of the developed countries to push their hardware that they developed during the Cold War period. Because if you see, the underwater technology development happened during the Cold War period, but it was specifically for the temperate and the polar region, the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap. So that technology, when you bring it here, it suffers almost 60% degradation. But they are still pushing this to the, and if it is remains a security thing, then developing countries have to balance between security and development. So that becomes a big dilemma for the leadership in these part of the world. Now, when we specifically talk of the coastal region, Now, most of the communities who have been, I mean, and particularly this part of the world, we have more than 10,000 years of civilization legacy with a lot of indigenous knowledge. But we get caught up in the whole, I mean, when we talk about MDA or UDA in whatever way, we get caught up in the corporate versus community kind of an interaction. So the technology does not reach the community. Now, very specifically giving you some examples, coastal connectivity is a huge issue, but being tropical waters, we have a huge problem of siltation. So, how do you ensure navigability? Second is aquaculture and fisheries. Now, how do you get, I mean, these are largely, fisheries, aquaculture is largely in the unorganized sector. How does technology reach the fishermen and the people, coastal communities who are engaged in this? How do you get a more structured way of reaching technology to these people, or getting the digital transformation? As we, I mean, we say digital transformation is very good for governance, but how will you bring it to the coastal community? And broadly, if you see the MDA as such, I mean, any new concept requires an organizational structure, or let me put it more in a much better way, is policy intervention, technology intervention, capacity and capability building. Now, this entire thing, policy intervention, what are the policies at the global level, regional level? I mean, I'm specifically talking about regional level because tropical waters in the Indian Ocean or the Indo-Pacific becomes a very important part. And to understand tropical waters, to understand the uniqueness and the gap of technology implementation is very important. How will you bring that in? Secondly, this the interaction or management of the coastal communities is through the local authorities. I mean, state or even at a lower level, the local authorities. Are they even equipped to do this? What is an organizational structure which can bring this whole MDA framework? And finally, we have to go towards digital transformation. Now, digital transformation requires a massive technological background or massive technology intervention. Are we in a position, or do we have the whole mechanism to make it available? And when we say capacity and capability building, that will be required across all levels, right from the policymaker to the stakeholders. And I think we have a lot of distance to cover. And there is always a temptation by the West or by the extra regional powers to push the hardware that they have. But it is very unfortunate that at some level it has just become a return on investment for them, which does not solve local problems. So, I mean, it is not that we can blame them. There is a lot of participation required from the local authorities and local stakeholders also. But this gap exists as of today. So, how do we kind of bridge this gap is something we need to look at. So, I think I'll stop here and look for other questions.
Thank you, sir. I think it is very crucial to understand the disconnect between how technological access to the coastal areas are not really in the hindsight for various policy interventions. So, moving on to the next question to Murlidhan sir, what are the various initiatives taken by the Indian government to enhance the UDA framework? And what steps have the Indian Navy and Coast Guard taken to improve the underwater surveillance in the coastal areas?
Now, basically, what has happened is that, as Arnab mentioned in passing, the maritime domain awareness itself came into focus after 9/11 in US. But as far as we are concerned, there was a serial bomb blast in Mumbai, which had taken place in March 1993. And the sea route had been used to smuggle in explosive and landed at various sites along Gujarat and Maharashtra coast. So therefore, enhancing seaward security or awareness of what is happening there was something that has propped up. And apart from Navy and Coast Guard, the involvement of state police, customs came along with the Navy Coast Guard. Then when we had the Kargil Review Committee group of ministers, they again addressed the issue with multiple proposals, including marine police in all coastal states, island territories, etc. When we were working, all these things happened. That is when the 26/11 attack happened, and sea route is used by terrorists to attack on Mumbai. Once again, highlighted the vulnerability of coastline. So we entire got a coastal security and awareness mechanism involving the Navy, the Coast Guard, Marine Police, ports, customs. BSF Marines Wing, etc. And we also started looking at registration of vessels, installation of transponders, national population register of coastal states, and coastal security schemes were set up with a chain of static sensors, port security, state maritime boards, and activation of a coastal security helpline. Now, what's happened is over the while we started that, now today we are able to monitor anybody who comes within 25, 30 nautical miles of our coast, any boat, etc. Even our own fishing boats have been given transporters, etc. And we are also monitoring.
Right. So we'll move on to the next question, sir. So we look into what are the various citizen-led reporting systems that can be developed to strengthen the underwater domain awareness. For example, fishermen reporting suspicious underwater activities. And how can essentially fishermen or coastal residents collaborate with security agencies to detect underwater?
Yeah, that's a very important question. And when we look at India, we have 11,000 kilometers of coastline. That's the Survey of India has updated. Earlier, we used to say 7,500, but it's 11,008 kilometers of coastline. And if you just multiply by 200 nautical miles, that is the EZ we are looking at. Now, to cover an EZ, or even if you bring it to, say, 12 nautical miles, the territorial waters, it's a huge area to be covered, right? And if you want to do proper governance, digital transformation is the only way forward. Otherwise, the method you said about getting information, it will give you some ad hoc information inputs of some area, which will probably not meet, the global. I mean, see, when you have to build a policy, you have to have a greater sense of what are the different diverse conditions that you may face. So my submission here is, and that's what, when we are pushing digital transformation, see, you can't put even sensors in across all the areas. So modeling and simulation is an approach, which is not just limited to technology, but even data analytics for the various socio-economic, socio-political, and socio-cultural aspects. So that has to be the approach. And the point that you mentioned, the validation of this model could be the inputs that we get from the local fishermen. But it cannot be that driving a system or erecting a system just based on that information. Because we are looking, I mean, you look at the multiple sectors, multiple applications, multiple communities, multiple technologies, the traditional knowledge is very diverse. So, I mean, there are a whole lot of things. I mean, right from aquaculture to, you can just name it. Coastal transformation. There is so much to be dealt with here. And unless we get a comprehensive picture, unless we get an inclusive way forward, and unless we have a very structured approach, we will not be able to achieve what we want to achieve. So my thought is that it has to be a very top down in the sense, I mean, I don't mean top down in terms of the authorities, but it has to be a very comprehensive, which can cover the entire gamut of things that we have to deal with. And the inputs that you mentioned, getting inputs from the coast, from the fishermen or the coastal community, can be to be used for validating the larger model, and then we can, I think, take it forward. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir, surely. Thank you. Now that we have Vice Admiral joining us, so you can go back to the question.
Yeah. Sorry, I think there was some, system error. Basically, what I was saying was while we were trying to enhance our MDA and UDA actually as part of that, now UDA has really become a priority area. So what the government has been focusing is on in developing and deploying unmanned underwater vehicles has become a part of our strategic thinking. Advanced technology include remotely operated underwater vehicles, autonomous underwater vehicles, and also sophisticated sensors and cameras, which allow you to pick up what all is happening. And similarly, we are also looking at partnerships between both state-run institutions such as Defense Research and Development Organization and private companies like Larsen and Toubro, etc., have come in, and concerted effort to reinforce maritime security, introduction of uh, underwater unmanned vehicle like Maya, Amog, Admaya, which I'm sure Arnab will be able to explain some of this even better. It's our commitment to embracing cutting edge technologies aimed at boosting underwater defense capabilities. Beyond, of course, sensors to monitor and closer to the coast, we are also trying to get the monitor the submarine movement, etc. It's something that is there. And today we are also looking at underwater harbor defense and surveillance systems, which is, I think, as I understand, in Naval Jetty in Port Blair, has been taking the first step of monitoring this. It's a very, very modern approach capable of discovering, identifying, tracking surface and underwater threats, etc. And then we are also trying to equip our Sea Guardian drones with sonobuoys, which you want to stay ahead of it. And because sonobuoys are very, very vital to detecting submarines and underwater, etc. And now the what has happened of late, and especially after the Prime Minister's visit, the emergence of defense relations between India and United States are increasing, and they are coming into the waters of underwater domain awareness. Uh, and there is an announcement which has come in the media of the agreement to co-produce US designed sonar buoys, and Indian and American companies are trying to partner with partnership to bring in a lot of technology and improvement. And I'll also mention in passing that the Information Fusion Center, which we set up in 2018 in Gurugram, it's actually for the entire domain uh, in the air, space, underwater, etc. So there again, we are getting a lot of cooperation from other countries, neighboring countries. And as per latest inputs, there are some 24 liaison officers from 20 countries, and it's got linkage with 133 partners from 57 countries, including navies, coast guard, maritime agencies. All this will allow us to get maritime security information, both surface and underwater. And basically, we're also talking of, probably we'll discuss this a little more later. There is that Autonomous System Industry Alliance, Asia as a short form, between India and US. And I think this will go a big way in giving us uh, much better awareness of the domain. I'll stop it here. We can discuss.
Thank you, sir. I think it is very much important to understand the various initiatives taken by the Indian government for this. Now we'll move on to a little bit more coastal perspective and understand what the local communities can do. Now, this question is also directed to Meridian sir, essentially in how do communities living in the coastal areas contribute to the UDA framework? And also what roles do the coastal state governments play in implementing UDA strategy?
Thank you, Alina. Actually, local communities play a very, very important role, which because they are acting as on the ground observers. They provide very crucial information about underwater activities, environmental changes, and their warnings can also warn us about the potential threats, contributing a more comprehensive understanding of the maritime environment, particularly in areas where they have deep knowledge and practices. Now, all our coastal fishing communities, the traditional communities, have over generations developed a lot of in-depth knowledge of their particular area. If they can also see a storm developing, while they were focused on fishing, that how larvae get destroyed or by bottom trawling what is happening, all this will enable them to, so they know it. But today what we need to do is to improve our UDA framework. A number of government, state agencies, and center have to come together. And we are a very democratic setup and extremely difficult. Now, one of the things is also you got to teach the coastal communities that some of these maritime activities that we do, technology bringing in, is for their own good. But vested interests sometimes play a lot of, inputs. For example, some years ago, they were trying to set up electricity generation in the coastal just off the coast using the windmill technologies. But that is objected to by the fishing community because they thought it'll dampen their fishing. Similarly, today, there is talk of moment this mining activities, underwater mining is talked of, our coast. Again, there is a lot of objection. So we got to take them along, educate them, and what is good, etc. Now, deep sea mining is a very big opportunity that the global community is focused on. And we in India have a lot of distance to cover. And now, again, uh, leaving the coastal areas in the South Indian Ocean, we had actually picked up, the world authorities had given us about 1.5 million square kilometers of area, which our scientists have examined it and retained 75,000 square kilometers of the area where we can do mining activities, which will give us a lot of, will help our economy and also give us a lot of raw material that we need. But that's some step away. But similar here, for example, we started the oil research that we came in some of these areas we had oil. There were objection to it also. So we got to take the coastal community along. And one of the other things also happening is around the Indian Ocean region, China started deploying their survey and research ships to enhance their underwater domain awareness and digital data, and also collecting a lot of data, which we need to be concerned about, we need to be warned about. And there are a lot of modern underwater threats that are high tech and developing. Now, this we can check this and also utilize this technology only if we have the coastal community working with us. And this is where we can help a lot. This is where the state governments come in, the local communities come in. Now, for their own safety and security, the Navy and Coast Guard had given some transponders extra, keeping track of the area so that we could send ships whenever the rescue. Now, you'll find it regularly in the newspapers, the Coast Guard and the Navy rescuing all this. But we got to take them along with us to specially use underwater technologies and knowledge. I'm sure Arnab can expand this a little more because this is what he's specializing in. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think it was crucial to understand the role of coastal communities, essentially in terms of underwater domain awareness. And now that we've looked into underwater domain awareness from a coastal perspective, I think it's important for us to look at it from a larger picture as well. So this question is to Dr. Arnab Das. So which countries has India partnered with for underwater domain awareness activities? And how does the international cooperation and partnerships help in securing critical maritime infrastructure, such as sea cables and energy installations?
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to add a couple of points with Admiral Sir has talked about. So, I mean, I had earlier mentioned about a comprehensive underwater picture. So, when we and see, finally, we want to achieve good governance or good ocean governance, and that is possible only through the digital transformation. Now, people talk about marine spatial planning, which gives you a digital picture of what is happening below in the maritime areas. Now, how do you get this digital transformation implemented on the ground? Uh, Two things, which is, and probably part of the answer is for the question that you put now also. If you have to achieve effective underwater domain awareness, you need to see, to understand, and to share. To see is the sensor and the platform that will carry the sensor. I mean, largely the hardware that we talk about, right? So, I mean, we have a distance to cover, so we can definitely import this part of the three aspects that we talk about: better sensors and better platforms. And already the government is engaged with an Asia, which Admiral Sir mentioned, autonomous systems industry alliance, is basically to get the state of the art hardware from the US to build our UDA. But the point is that once the data is collected, the understand part where the data analytics comes in, this is where the customization also becomes important. I mean, what is data analytics? I mean, you do the pre-processing. Pre-processing will include minimizing or mitigating the tropical distortions that has happened, and then the application specific processing, whether it is a military application for surveillance, or it is fisheries, or any blue economy deep sea mining. You need to do the processing. And the third is post processing. I mean, there could be certain distortions. So that the understand part, data analytics part, is something I would say that we should not be outsourcing this. This should be done indigenously with our own team. Of course, there is a whole infrastructure requirement of data analytics, but I think India is reasonably well off in terms of the data science or the capabilities. But we have not focused in this area. So this will also kind of take care of our concerns of data being shared by with the other countries or with the other powers. The third is to share. Now, this is very important. Now, when we say to share, the display or the actionable input that you have extracted in the first two stages has to be made available to the user in real time, firstly. And the second is it has to be in a format that is understood by the user. Now, if it is a policy maker, he has a very specific requirement. He needs long-term data, for a strategic purpose. But the stakeholder requires tactical information. So he needs it in a particular form, in a particular format, and for a particular purpose. The third most important is, the local community. They have to get information. Now, they're like, suppose we talk about shrimp farming. Now, a particular fisherman is looking, or aquaculture, he is looking at it not just shrimp, but also a specific species, L. venemi or whatever. So he has to get, and he doesn't have the luxury of carrying a laptop. So mobile app. So the share part is equally important. And I think nobody else in the world other than us can do this. So we have to be very clinical in our collaboration. And when you talked about countries, we have to be very clinical in how do we collaborate and how do we get. The second aspect of this is the human resource. Now, human resource also we need to divide it into three parts. The first is the high-end data analytics, right? So these are top technocrats, or whatever we have. We have IITs, and I don't want to name organizations, but top-end data analysts. The second is, once the data is there, we need multidisciplinary people to analyze that input that has come. It could be even political science people, geopolitics people, who analyze this data and make sense. How do we move forward? I mean, what kind of intervention, whether it is policy or even technology. And the third part is the field deployment specialist. I mean, we have to go to the waterfront and apply and, or even collect data, or, understand, interface with the communities. So this third part, field deployment specialist, can be definitely the coastal community with indigenous understanding of how to deal with the waterfront. Now, can you imagine a city dweller being deployed? I mean, when we run an organization, I mean, I really get scared if I send a kid who has grown up in an urban setting to send to the waterfront. I mean, Admiral Sir knows, the risk of. But if I send a coastal community kid or coastal community person, he can actually teach me far more how to deal with the coastal issues. So I think we have to structure our thought process in such a way. You imagine coastal community even participating in this digital transformation, how fantastic it will be. So, clinically understanding the whole approach and, implementing is something we have to focus on. I think I'll stop here. And I think that answers both your questions. I mean, continuation with what Sir had talked about and the question that you asked me.
Yes, sir. It answers question perfectly. Now that we have come to the end of the questions, we have a question from our YouTube chat box. It reads, "Thank you so much for the insightful discussion on UDA and MDA. What is the role of technological advancements in addressing environmental challenges and disaster preparedness?" Both of you could answer this.
Sir, after you. Sir.
Yeah, okay. See, basically, technology comes in a big way to help us. I'll put it very simply. Earlier, when we talked of MDA, we just had those simple radars on ships, etc., and very basic sonars, which could give us an input about what are the kind of contacts that are coming in, are there any submarine threats, etc. Today, with stream sonars and with better kind of sonars, etc., you are able to get much more distance. Today, virtually, about 100, 150 nautical miles around you, or even more, you can come to know what all is happening by deploying some ships ahead, or by sensors, or sending the unmanned aerial vehicles, etc. So technology is always something that helps us to develop that much more knowledge in everything. So not only in MDA, with technology, or if you are able to get a weapons of longer ranges, which technology has given us, which means you can tackle your threats that much further ahead. They won't even come near you. So that is how technology helps us in every aspect of it. I'm sure some of the underwater domain, Arnab will explain to you better.
Thank you so much, sir. I think some part of it I have answered in my previous point of to see, to understand, and to share. But I just wanted to add beyond that. See, first and foremost, uh, we if we think that everything we'll do it on our own, probably it will take us a lot of time, and we'll never be able to achieve that. So I am not somebody who's advocating that we should ban imports or something like that. But we have to be clinical. What is it that we get from outside? How does it safeguard? To be today, what happens is the entire thing comes as a full package. To see, to understand, and to share comes as a full package, and we are not able to customize it for our tropical waters. And if a technology that comes with 60% degradation of performance in our waters, then we will not achieve what we want to achieve. So how do we kind of build that up in a very nuanced way? Today hardware is easily available. There's an open market. The whole globalization made it so much more easier to get technology. Of course, there is some restriction on what kind of technology you can input. All that is fine, but still there is a lot of technology that is available in the open market which can be used to configure our. My point is that it should not be a product driven technology drive. It should be a solution driven project technology drive. I mean, we should be looking at the solution. If we do not define what the solution we want, if you define what it is want, then you can differentiate. I mean, if you said to see what kind of sensors, what kind of platform, then whether you want to go to, I mean, let me not name countries. I mean, there are few countries who have advanced technologies available. China is competing with the world, but so then we can choose what kind of hardware we want. But the data analytics has to be done indigenously without any doubt. We do have the capability, but we are not focusing on this. That's my only worry. Now, but when we say data analytics, then we need the entire infrastructure for data analytics, the computational infrastructure that is required. So all that has to be built up. The second is when you have so much data at one location, then the whole cybersecurity issues are there. So you have to obviously deal with all of that and kind of make a complete. And the third most important is that where is it going? The user. You have to have the user in mind, whether it is a coastal community, whether it is a top defense application, or it is a deep sea mining. Then we can customize. So you have to have a very comprehensive, structured, and inclusive. And that's what the UDF framework that I have mentioned in my paper, that kind of brings this together. So see, we have today there is so much of fragmentation. I mean, and we always run out of budget. After the 2611, there was so much concern about security. So we went to the government and said, the whole security establishment went to the government and said that we need to, and that's how this IFC IOR, which Admiral Sir mentioned, came up. See, the government also has to balance various competing budget requirements. I mean, there are so many socio-economic and socio-political requirements, and then of course security. I mean, nobody can undermine the requirement of security, but why should they be competing? Why can't there be pooling of resources and synergizing of effort? This capacity building, now sonar performance is poor. That is a problem. Now, if the defense or the strategic security apparatus or the establishment has to solve it on their own, can the defense budget do the heavy lifting for this? I don't think so. So can we not focus on capacity and capability building in terms of enhancing the sonar performance, where all the stakeholders come in together, pool in resources and synergize their effort? Once we have a better sonar, whether it is for deep sea mining, whether it is for underwater surveillance of drones or for submarines, all of them can benefit. So I think we have to have a very different approach towards this and reduce the fragmentation that we look at. So I think I'll stop here.
Yeah, and I think I may just add here that while we get technology or technology collaboration, we have to stand on our own, which Arnab had mentioned. Because while we get it, we take what we want, and our own team should be able to look after and do it, at least spare, support, etc. Because I remember an incident many years back when we had the Pokhran, when we did the nuclear bars, when we tested it. Lots of these countries which are supplying us just stopped everything. And we had difficulty flying our own aircraft, etc., which had been imported because of lack of spares. Of course, over a period of time with diplomacy, we overcame many of these. But so this is something, when you get technology, this is what it is. And it's a simple thing. If you just get a wristwatch with high end with all fancy things, if you're not able to support it, or if your neighborhood watchkeeper, watch repairer cannot support it. What is the point in having it? So that is something that we need to get.
Thank you, sir. Now, with that, we've come to the end of the webinar, and the following are the key takeaways from this webinar. I'll start summing up with Muralidharan, sir. With you, we've understood the concept of maritime domain awareness and how we've essentially linked it with underwater domain awareness, a crucial link that is very much important in today's world to understand how threats have changed across years in the maritime arena. And also, you've highlighted how, from a security perspective, the underwater domain awareness is crucial to sea cables, communication lines, and undersea vehicles. Thank you, sir, for also bringing in the initiatives taken by the government, highlighting underwater vehicle sensors, cameras, private companies, detection of underwater vehicles, etc. And they've also brought out how submarine movements and underwater harbor defense surveillance systems, which is essentially in the port player, are also crucial elements in this regard. And also how the new Autonomous Systems Industry Alliance initiative between India and US is also very much crucial. Now, another thing that was also highlighted was about how information that is from the coastal communities is very much important, because the information that is with the communities in the coastal area or the fishermen are very much crucial because they have very much deep knowledge about their particular area. And so it is important to integrate this as well as give them more knowledge about the advancing technologies, because sometimes, as you mentioned, the local communities are very much against the very idea of technology there. So it's also important that the people are educated more on its benefits as such. Now we'll move on to Dr. Arnab Das. Dr. Arnab Das mentioned about how larger MDA is very much missed out, essentially in the underwater component, which is a big challenge for India or any country as such. And he also spoke about how the MDA frameworks, they stay on the high table and the developing countries find it very difficult to participate because they have very little resources. And so a very big concern for the developing countries is how they have to navigate between security and development. And another issue which both of you have highlighted is essentially how technology finds it very difficult to reach the community, because the issue of digital transformation as such is very much limited to a very different section of society, and coastal communities are not really in aligned with. So while we move forward with technology, it is also important to understand that whether the local governments or the local communities are equipped to handle this. So in essentially, we have a lot of distance to cover in terms of technology. And another important part that Dr. Arnab highlighted is how information sharing is very much crucial for this framework. And applying this data as well as having real-time user-based data available to policymakers as well as to people who need to utilize these data along with the local communities is very much important. So it is crucial to cater these data based on how important it is to these different sections of the people. And now with that, we've come to the end of this session. And I really thank our panelists for taking their valuable time out and sharing their expert viewpoints with us. CPPR also extends our gratitude to Asia Foundation for supporting us in this project in building a network for coastal states in coastal think tanks in India. I also thank the CPPR team for organizing the webinar. And last but not the least, I thank the audience for participating in our discussion today. Keep following our social media for updates on our ICT project. With this, I conclude our webinar. Thank you and wishing each one of you a great day ahead.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Arnab.
Thank you, sir.